The Invisible Architect. Vivian Morgan adjusted her emerald gown in the mirror, hoping tonight would finally be different. For 3 years, she had worked behind the scenes at Harrison Enterprises, transforming her boyfriend Julian's struggling company into the darling of Silicon Valley's venture capital scene. Her business degree and marketing genius had remained uncredited on every successful pitch deck, every profitable campaign, every strategic partnership. Almost ready? Julian Harrison appeared in the doorway, his custom Armani tuxedo highlighting the confidence of a man who believed his success was solely self-made. At 38, he carried himself with the entitlement of someone born into wealth, though his own empire had nearly collapsed before Vivian quietly rescued it. "Just finishing up," she replied, fastening her grandmother's pearl earrings, the only luxury item not purchased by Julian's credit card. Everything else, from her designer dress to the penthouse they shared, came with invisible strings attached. Tonight's charity gala represented months of Vivian's behind-the-scenes coordination. She'd secured the historic Westmore Hotel venue, convinced reluctant celebrities to attend, and personally selected the small businesses that would benefit from the fundraiser. As always, Julian would take the microphone and the credit. "You've outdone yourself," he remarked, scanning the ballroom as they arrived. "The Morgenstern investors are here, exactly who I wanted to impress." Vivian spotted the influential venture capital group across the room. "I invited them personally. I thought their focus on sustainable tech aligned perfectly with your new green initiative." Julian barely nodded, already scanning the crowd for more important connections. His hand rested possessively at the small of her back, guiding her through the sea of Silicon Valley elites. She recognized most faces, people she had emailed, called, and negotiated with while using Julian's name. The evening progressed predictably until Julian disappeared during the silent auction. Vivian circulated alone, answering questions about Harrison Enterprises' upcoming projects with the expertise of someone who had developed them herself. When asked about her role, she repeated the company line, "I support Julian's vision." The words tasted increasingly bitter. An hour passed before she spotted Julian again, but he wasn't alone. Slender fingers wrapped around his arm, belonging to Natasha Winters, the 25-year-old heiress whose father controlled access to Asian markets that Julian had been pursuing for months. Vivian froze mid-conversation with a potential donor, watching as Julian whispered something in Natasha's ear that made her laugh with practiced delicacy. The intimate gesture was unmistakable, as was the way his hand lingered at her waist. Exactly where it had rested on Vivian earlier. She approached them slowly, maintaining composure despite the heat rising to her cheeks. "Julian, the Morgensterns were asking about you." Julian barely glanced her way. "Vivian, you remember Natasha? Her father's considering a significant investment in our expansion." Before Vivian could respond, Richard Morgenstern himself appeared beside them. "Harrison, there you are. We were just discussing your remarkable growth this past year." "All about finding the right connections," Julian replied smoothly, pulling Natasha closer. "Speaking of connections, Natasha and I have been exploring some interesting synergies." Richard chuckled. "I gathered as much. And who is this?" he asked, finally acknowledging Vivian. "This is Vivian," Julian said dismissively. "She's been helping with some administrative work. Just a phase in our company's growth, really. We're moving toward more strategic partnerships now." He smiled meaningfully at Natasha. The words cut through Vivian like glass. 3 years of her life, her ideas, her network, reduced to just a phase while Julian leveraged their relationship for advancement. The Morgensterns and several nearby investors exchanged knowing glances, and Vivian understood with sudden clarity. In this world, she was viewed as disposable. Without a word, she turned and walked calmly toward the exit, Julian, too, engrossed in his networking to notice her departure. It wasn't until she reached the grand staircase that she allowed herself to stop, gripping the marble banister as she breathed deeply. This wasn't just about a betrayal of the heart. It was about the theft of her intellectual property, her professional dignity, her future. And suddenly, Vivian knew exactly what she needed to do. The strategic retreat. Vivian descended the ornate staircase with measured steps, ignoring the curious glances from arriving guests. The cool night air provided momentary relief as she stepped outside, her mind racing not with heartbreak, but with calculation. She wouldn't give Julian the satisfaction of a scene. Something far more effective was forming in her thoughts. She walked purposefully down the block, pulling her phone from her clutch. After a moment's hesitation, she scrolled to a contact she hadn't called in over 2 years, Daniel Rosenthal. Before Julian, Daniel had been her colleague at Vertex Innovations, a rising tech consultancy where they'd developed a reputation for revitalizing struggling companies. Their professional chemistry had been undeniable, though they'd never crossed into romantic territory despite the office rumors. When Julian had recruited her with promises of partnership, both professional and personal, she'd left Vertex behind, along with the friendship that had meant more than she'd admitted. The phone rang 3 times before his familiar voice answered. "Vivian, is everything all right?" "Daniel," she said, her voice steadier than she expected. "Are you still looking for a strategic marketing director?" A pause. "For Vertex? We've been searching for months. The position's evolved into something bigger since you left. We're launching a new division. I'd like to discuss it. Tonight, if possible." Another pause. "You're still with Harrison?" "Not as of 20 minutes ago," she replied, surprising herself with the finality in her voice. "I've just realized it's time to reclaim my work." "The Winston Hotel bar in 30 minutes, Daniel said without hesitation. Vivian hailed a taxi, using the short ride to compose herself. She wasn't running away. She was running toward something that should have been hers all along. Daniel was already waiting when she arrived, his tailored navy suit a stark contrast to Julian's flashier style. At 35, Daniel had the quiet confidence of someone who built things that lasted. He stood when he saw her, genuine concern evident in his expression. "You look stunning," he said, then added with a small smile, "and slightly murderous." Despite everything, Vivian laughed. "An appropriate combination for what I'm about to propose." Over drinks, she outlined the past 3 years. The marketing, strategies she'd developed for Harrison Enterprises, the connections she'd leveraged, the green technology initiative that was entirely her creation, which Julian had just implied was part of his synergy with Natasha Winters. "None of it was officially mine," she admitted. "I was naive enough to believe that loving someone meant our success would be shared." She took a careful sip of her martini. "But I kept records of everything. Every email, every draft, every original concept." Daniel's expression had grown increasingly serious. "You know what Julian's like when crossed. He'll try to destroy your reputation if you move against him." "Which is why I need more than just another job," Vivian replied. "I need a platform that makes him irrelevant." Daniel studied her for a long moment before pulling out his phone. He pulled up an elegant presentation and slid it across the table. "This is what we've been developing in secret for the past year. We're calling it Prism." Vivian scrolled through the slides, her eyes widening. Vertex had evolved from consultancy to innovation hub, with Prism as its crown jewel, a platform that would revolutionize how sustainable technologies were funded and developed. "This is brilliant," she murmured, recognizing elements similar to concepts she'd pitched to Julian, which he'd dismissed as too idealistic. "It's missing something critical," Daniel said. "A strategic marketing architect who understands both the technology and the social impact angles. Someone who can make sustainable innovation sexy to investors who only care about profit margins." "Someone like me," Vivienne said softly. Exactly like you. Daniel leaned forward. I'm offering you more than a director position, Vivienne. I want you as a partner in Prism. Equal billing, equal credit, equal share. Vivienne stared at him, searching for the catch. Why now? Why me? Because I've watched from a distance as you transformed Harrison Enterprises while getting none of the recognition. Because the ideas you're describing were ones we used to discuss before you left. And because, he added with unexpected intensity, I've regretted not giving you a reason to stay every day since. The implications hung between them, professional and possibly something more. Before she could respond, Daniel continued, The timing is particularly interesting because we're launching Prism publicly tomorrow night. Tomorrow? Where? Daniel's smile held a touch of mischief. The second night of the charity gala you organized. We're the midnight announcement sponsor. Vivienne felt a slow smile spread across her face as the pieces fell into place. Julian doesn't know? Harrison Enterprises was specifically kept off the notification list, but I can add a name to the presenter lineup within the hour. His eyes held a question. The weight of 3 years of invisibility, of diminishment, of working in shadows, crystallized into perfect clarity. Vivienne straightened her shoulders and extended her hand formally across the table. Daniel Rosenthal, I accept your partnership offer. He took her hand, but instead of shaking it, he held it for a moment longer than necessary. There's a lot to do before tomorrow night. Are you ready to work through the night like old times? Vivienne thought of the emerald dress hanging in Julian's penthouse, along with everything else she had accumulated during their relationship. None of it mattered. She could build again, but this time she would build for herself. Let's go, she said, standing. We have a company to launch and a ballroom to reclaim. As they left the hotel, Vivienne felt something she hadn't experienced in years, the exhilarating freedom of choosing her own path. What had begun as a retreat was transforming into a strategic advance, and Julian Harrison would never see it coming. The calculated return. Precisely 24 hours later, Vivienne stood in the service entrance of the Westmore Hotel, dressed in a sleek midnight blue gown that Daniel's assistant had somehow procured on impossibly short notice. The dress, unlike the emerald one from yesterday, was a statement of authority rather than decoration. Her makeup was flawless, her hair swept into an elegant updo that revealed the determined set of her jaw. Nervous? Daniel appeared beside her, looking distinguished in his charcoal tuxedo. The past day had been a whirlwind of preparations. Reviewing, presentation decks, meeting key Vertex team members, and finalizing the details of her partnership agreement. They had worked seamlessly together, falling back into their old rhythm as if the 3-year gap had never existed. Not nervous, Vivienne replied. Ready. Through her event planning connections, she knew exactly when the midnight announcement was scheduled. Julian would be front and center. He never missed an opportunity to be seen at pivotal moments, especially when cameras were present. The thought no longer pained her. It was simply a tactical advantage. Our investors are already inside, Daniel said, checking his watch, including some who've been waffling on committing to Prism. Once they see the full team, I think they'll be convinced. By full team, you mean me, Vivienne said with a raised eyebrow. Daniel's smile was genuine. I've been telling them for months that Prism needed the right strategic visionary to truly launch. Now I can show them I found her. A staff member approached, clipboard in hand. Mr. Rosenthal, you're on in 10 minutes. Daniel offered his arm to Vivienne. Shall we? They entered through a side door, emerging into the glittering ballroom where, just yesterday, Vivienne had watched her personal and professional life implode. Tonight, the space felt different. Where she had once seen a room full of people who dismissed her, she now recognized potential allies, clients, and witnesses to her rebirth. She spotted Julian immediately. He stood near the stage, one arm possessively around Natasha's waist, as he gestured emphatically to the Morgenstern investors. He hadn't noticed Vivian yet, a final moment of invisibility she would use to her advantage. "There's our primary target," she murmured to Daniel, nodding toward a distinguished woman in her 60s. "Regina Blackwood controls the investment consortium that Julian's been courting for months." Daniel followed her gaze. "The one he's been using Natasha to get to?" "Precisely. But Julian fundamentally misunderstands Regina. She doesn't care about social connections. She invests in people who deliver results." "Like you," Daniel said with quiet confidence. "Like us," Vivian corrected. "Him." The master of ceremonies tapped the microphone, drawing everyone's attention. "Ladies and gentlemen, we've reached the moment for our special midnight announcement. I'm pleased to introduce Daniel Rosenthal, CEO of Vertex Innovations, to unveil their groundbreaking new initiative." Applause rippled through the crowd as Daniel squeezed Vivian's hand reassuringly before stepping onto the stage. She positioned herself strategically, waiting for her cue. "Thank you all for your generous contributions to tonight's worthy causes," Daniel began smoothly. "At Vertex, we believe that innovation should serve humanity, not the other way around, which is why I'm thrilled to announce the launch of Prism, a revolutionary platform that will transform how sustainable technologies are funded, developed, and brought to market." Murmurs of interest spread through the crowd. Vivian watched as Julian's expression shifted from polite attention to growing concern as he recognized Daniel as a competitor. "Prism isn't just another investment vehicle," Daniel continued. "It's a complete ecosystem that connects innovators with the resources they need while ensuring that environmental and social impacts remain at the forefront. But vision alone isn't enough. Execution is everything." He paused, scanning the room. "Which is why I'm especially proud to introduce my partner in this venture, the strategic architect who will ensure Prism doesn't just change the market, but defines it. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Vivian Morgan, Vertex's new executive partner and Prism's co-founder." The spotlight swung to Vivian, illuminating her as she walked confidently toward the stage. The shock on Julian's face was immediate and profound, a mixture of disbelief, betrayal, and dawning horror as he realized what was happening. Regina Blackwood's interest was visibly piqued, her shrewd eyes following Vivian's every move. Several of Harrison Enterprises' most valued investors turned to watch, recognition flickering across their faces as they placed her from countless meetings where she had been introduced as Julian's assistant or +1. Vivian took her place beside Daniel, accepting the microphone with a gracious smile. "Thank you, Daniel. While some of you may know me from other contexts," she said, allowing her gaze to briefly meet Julian's, "tonight marks my official return to the innovation sector, where I began my career." She launched into a compelling overview of Prism's strategic approach, effortlessly weaving in references to her previous work that many in the room would recognize as initiatives they had attributed to Julian. Without directly naming Harrison Enterprises, she systematically reclaimed her professional legacy. "The sustainable technology sector doesn't need more empty promises or greenwashing," she concluded, her voice strong and clear. "It needs authentic leadership and proven execution. With Prism, that's exactly what we're offering." The applause was immediate and enthusiastic. Daniel joined her for the final bow, their united front presenting a powerful image of partnership and mutual respect. As they stepped down from the stage, they were immediately surrounded by interested investors, including Regina Blackwood herself. "Ms. Morgan," Regina said, extending her hand, "I've apparently been admiring your work for some time without knowing it. I'd very much like to discuss Prism's investment opportunities." Out of the corner of her eye, Vivian could see Julian attempting to approach, his face flushed with anger. Natasha hung back, clearly recognizing the shifting dynamics in the room. "I'd be delighted, Miss Blackwood," Vivian replied smoothly. "Perhaps we could meet tomorrow morning? I suspect tonight will be quite busy with introductions." As Regina agreed and moved away, Julian finally pushed through the crowd, leaving Natasha behind. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" he hissed, low enough that only Vivian and Daniel could hear. Vivian met his gaze evenly. "Reclaiming what's mine, Julian. You called me a phase. It turns out you were right. You were the phase. This," she gestured to Daniel and the prism presentation still displayed on screens around the room, "is my future." The ripple effect. The morning after the gala dawned bright and clear, but Vivian had been awake for hours. From the window of her suite at the Winston Hotel, hastily arranged by Daniel's efficient team, she watched the city come to life while scrolling through her phone. Overnight, the tech world had exploded with news of her dramatic career pivot. TechCrunch had already published a feature. Prism shines, Vertex Innovations unveils revolutionary platform with surprise executive partner. 3 interview requests awaited her response, along with dozens of congratulatory messages from former colleagues and industry contacts who had witnessed her unacknowledged contributions for years. A knock at her door revealed Daniel balancing a tray of coffee and pastries. "Breakfast before battle," he said with a wry smile. Regina Blackwood confirmed for 9, and the Morgensterns requested a meeting at 11. Vivian accepted the coffee gratefully. "The Morgensterns? That's unexpected." "Not really," Daniel replied, setting down the tray and pulling out his tablet. "They've been following the social media storm. Julian's been doing damage control all night." He showed her Julian's hastily released statement, claiming he was delighted to see Ms. Morgan pursuing new opportunities, while implying she had been a minor contributor at Harrison Enterprises. The transparent attempt at minimizing her importance was undermined by the comments section, where several former employees had chimed in with their own stories of Vivian's unattributed work. "He's panicking," Vivian observed, feeling oddly detached from the man who had dominated her life for years. "What about Natasha?" Daniel swiped to another screen. Already distancing herself, she gave a brief comment to Business Insider, something about focusing on her father's company's legitimate partnerships. Vivian smiled slightly. "Smart woman. I never had anything against her personally." "Speaking of personal," Daniel said, his tone shifting, "we should address the speculation. Several gossip columns had already connected dots between Vivian's personal relationship with Julian and her professional departure, painting various dramatic scenarios. Some had also noted her apparent closeness with Daniel, spawning rumors about whether romance had motivated her career move. "Let them talk," Vivian said decisively. "The work will speak for itself." Daniel studied her for a moment. "You've changed." "Have I? Or have I simply stopped compromising?" She met his gaze steadily. "I spent 3 years making myself smaller to fit Julian's narrative. I won't do that again, for anyone." The implication hung between them until Daniel nodded. "Good. Prism needs the uncompromised version of you." He checked his watch. "Ready to meet with Regina?" Regina Blackwood proved to be everything Vivian had assessed from a distance: shrewd, direct, and unwilling to waste time on pleasantries. In the Winston's private conference room, she reviewed Prism's business plan with laser-focused attention. "This sustainability assessment matrix," Regina said, pointing to a section Vivian had developed overnight. "You created something similar for Harrison's Green Initiative, didn't you?" "The framework, yes," Vivian acknowledged. "But this version incorporates what I've learned since then about investor priorities and implementation challenges." Regina's eyes narrowed thoughtfully. "Harrison presented that initiative as his brainchild when courting my investment group." "I'm sure he did," Vivian replied evenly. Regina closed the folder. Ms. Morgan, I appreciate directness. Was your departure from Harrison Enterprises planned, or was it provoked by last night's situation? Daniel tensed beside her, but Vivian remained composed. The timing was circumstantial. The decision was inevitable. I believe in giving credit where it's due, both positive and negative. A hint of a smile touched Regina's lips. Refreshing. She pulled out a contract from her briefcase. My consortium is prepared to offer Prism initial funding of $70 million, with benchmarked options for an additional 130 over 3 years. Vivian and Daniel exchanged stunned glances. It was double what they had hoped for. That's extremely generous, Daniel managed. It's strategic, Regina corrected, and conditional on Ms. Morgan's continued leadership. She slid the contract across the table. I invest in people first, ideas second. Don't make me regret it. After Regina departed, they barely had time to process the development before the Morgensterns arrived. Richard Morgenstern, the same investor who had witnessed Julian's dismissive treatment of Vivian, appeared genuinely contrite. I owe you an apology, Ms. Morgan, he began. I've had business dealings with Harrison for years, but it seems I misjudged who was driving his success. His son Thomas, who headed their technology investments division, was more direct. We're pulling out of our pending deal with Harrison Enterprises. The Green Initiative was the primary attraction, and it's become evident that the vision behind it has relocated. By early afternoon, the pattern had repeated itself across multiple meetings. Investors and potential clients who had previously dealt with Harrison Enterprises were reevaluating their relationships, redirecting their interest toward Prism and, specifically, toward Vivian. Between meetings, Vivian's phone lit up with a call from an unexpected name. Natasha Winters. Should I take this? She asked Daniel, showing him the screen. He raised an eyebrow. Your call. Curious, Vivian answered. Natasha, this is a surprise. I'll be brief, Natasha said, her voice cool but not hostile. Julian's been telling everyone you stole proprietary information. He's threatening legal action. Vivian felt a flicker of concern. I expected as much. What you might not expect, Natasha continued, is that he's been calling my father every hour, trying to leverage their potential partnership to get backing for his claims. And my father doesn't appreciate being manipulated. Julian showed his true character when the pressure was on. There was a pause. I'm not calling to make amends or become friends, Vivian, but I respect what you did. It took courage. After the call ended, Vivian relayed the conversation to Daniel, who immediately contacted their legal team to prepare for potential litigation. Julian won't give up easily, he warned. His ego won't allow it. As if summoned by his name, Vivian's phone buzzed with a text from Julian. This isn't over. You've humiliated me for the last time. She showed it to Daniel, who frowned. We should increase security for the Prism launch party tomorrow. No, Vivian said firmly. That's exactly what he wants? To make me appear afraid? To create drama? That overshadows our work. She deleted the message without responding. Julian's power came from making others feel small. I'm done giving him that power. By evening, they had secured 5 major investors and scheduled demonstrations with 24 potential clients. The Prism platform, once just an ambitious concept, was rapidly becoming Silicon Valley's most anticipated launch. As they finished their final meeting of the day, Daniel's assistant delivered a thick envelope addressed to Vivian. Inside was a formal letter from Harrison Enterprises, demanding the return of all proprietary materials and intellectual property. Daniel began to call their lawyer, but Vivian placed her hand over his phone. Wait, she said, a slow smile spreading across her face as she scanned the document. This is perfect. Perfect. He's threatening you. No, Vivian replied, her eyes gleaming with the satisfaction of someone who had planned several moves. ahead. He's given me exactly the opening I needed. Julian thinks he's playing chess, but he never bothered to learn which pieces I control. She pulled out her laptop and began typing rapidly, the determination in her expression making it clear that whatever counterattack she was crafting would change the game entirely. Tomorrow isn't just about launching Prism, she said without looking up. It's about ensuring that Julian Harrison never again takes credit for another person's brilliance, mine or anyone else's. Daniel watched her work, recognition dawning in his eyes. You've been planning this since before you called me, haven't you? Vivian paused, her fingers hovering over the keyboard. Let's just say I learned something valuable from my time with Julian. Always document everything. She resumed typing, her voice soft but resolute. Some lessons are expensive. Making him pay for them? That's priceless. The new foundation. The Prism launch party transformed the industrial warehouse space in south of Market into an ethereal landscape of light and technology. Interactive displays showcased the platform's capabilities, while sustainable materials and living installations demonstrated the company's commitment to its values. Unlike the opulent charity gala, this event radiated authentic purpose rather than performative wealth. Vivienne moved through the crowd in a tailored white suit that symbolized her fresh start. She had spent the morning finalizing her countermove to Julian's legal threats, a comprehensive digital portfolio documenting every project she had created during her time at Harrison Enterprises, complete with original drafts, time-stamped emails, and development notes. The package had been delivered to every major investor and board member connected to Harrison's company, along with a professionally worded letter clarifying her intellectual ownership without directly threatening litigation. The only misunderstanding, Regina replied, was my previous failure to identify who was truly responsible for the initiatives that interested my consortium. She turned to Vivienne. The sustainable housing developers from Norway have arrived. They're particularly interested in how Prism might support their expansion. Thank you, Regina. I'll be right there. Vivian turned back to Julian. You should leave now. Whatever we had, personally or professionally, is over. For a moment, something like genuine regret flashed across Julian's face. Vivian, please. We can fix this. There's nothing to fix, she replied gently, the last of her anger dissolving into pity. It's already broken beyond repair. But I'm not. As security escorted Julian out, Daniel approached cautiously. Everything okay? Vivian took a deep breath. Better than okay. That was closure. The evening progressed triumphantly. Prism's official unveiling was met with enthusiastic investment commitments and partnership inquiries that exceeded their most optimistic projections. By midnight, when the final guests departed, Vivienne found herself standing on the rooftop terrace, gazing at the city skyline while the team celebrated below. Daniel joined her, offering his jacket against the evening chill. Penny, for your thoughts? I'm thinking about foundations, she replied. 3 days ago, mine collapsed. Now I'm building something new, but I'm wondering if it will last, he finished. She nodded. With Julian, everything was built on shifting sand. Ambition, attraction, convenience. It was doomed from the start. Daniel leaned against the railing beside her. What kind of foundation are you looking for now? Truth, she said simply. In my work, in my relationships. No more compromise, no more shrinking myself to fit someone else's narrative. That's a solid starting point. He turned to face her directly. Vivian, I need to be clear about something. I brought you into Prism because you're brilliant at what you do. Whatever happens or doesn't happen between us personally, your position is secure. She studied him thoughtfully. Are you saying you want something to happen personally? I'm saying I want you to have the space to decide what you want without feeling any pressure. His honesty was refreshing after years of Julian's calculated charm. We have time. Time, she repeated, the concept suddenly precious. That's a luxury I haven't allowed myself. Below them, the last of the launch party guests were departing. Among them, Vivian spotted Natasha Winters, who caught her eye and offered a small, respectful nod before sliding into her waiting car. 6 months, Vivian said suddenly. Daniel looked puzzled. What? I'm giving myself 6 months to focus, exclusively on building Prism. No romantic entanglements, no distractions. She turned to face him fully. And then, if you're still interested, we can explore what might exist between us, as equals, as partners in every sense. A slow smile spread across his face. I can work with that timeline. In the meantime, she continued, I'm reclaiming something else Julian took from me. She pulled out her phone and opened an application form she'd been contemplating all day. The International Women in Sustainable Technology Mentorship Program. I declined their leadership role 3 years ago because Julian said it would distract from our company goals. Daniel nodded approvingly. They'd be lucky to have you. It's not just about professional advancement, she explained. It's about making sure no other woman has her ideas stolen or her light dimmed by someone who claims to love her. As they returned to the celebration below, Vivian felt the pieces of her new life falling into place, not as a reaction to Julian's betrayal, but as an authentic expression of who she had always been beneath the constraints she had accepted. 6 months passed in a whirlwind of achievement. Prism exceeded every projection, becoming the industry standard for sustainable technology development. The mentorship program flourished under Vivian's leadership, with 23 women launching their own ventures with Prism's support. Harrison Enterprises, meanwhile, struggled through a public reckoning as Julian's business practices came under scrutiny, leading to his eventual removal by the board. On a crisp autumn evening, exactly 6 months after the launch party, Vivian and Daniel sat in a quiet corner of the rooftop garden they had built at Vertex headquarters, a living symbol of their commitment to their values. Your 6 months are up, Daniel said, a touch of nervousness in his voice that Vivian found endearing. Have you made any decisions? Instead of answering directly, she handed him a small portfolio. Inside was a blueprint, not for a technology, platform, or marketing strategy, but for a community innovation center in an underserved neighborhood. This is my next project, she explained, a place where people with brilliant ideas but limited resources can develop them with dignity. I'm funding it personally. Daniel reviewed the plans with growing admiration. This is incredible, Vivian, but what does it have to do with us? She took his hand, her expression soft but determined. Everything, because I'm not asking you to join this project as my business partner or my boyfriend. I'm asking you to build this with me as my true partner in every sense. Someone who stands beside me, not in front of me or behind me. Understanding dawned in his eyes. Are you proposing? I'm proposing a new kind of foundation, she replied. One built on equality, respect, and the understanding that love should elevate, not diminish. Daniel's answer came not in words, but in action, pulling out a small velvet box that had clearly been waiting for this moment. Inside was a ring unlike any conventional engagement design, a band of recycled platinum inlaid with a constellation of tiny ethical diamonds arranged in the shape of Prism's logo. Great minds think alike, he said with a smile. I had this made weeks ago, but I was waiting for your timeline. As Vivian slipped on the ring, a symbol not of possession, but of parallel journeys willingly intertwined, she reflected on how completely her life had transformed. The charity gala that had broken her heart now seemed like a necessary fracture, creating space for something authentic to grow. From the garden vantage point, she could see the lights of the city coming alive as dusk settled, including the distinctive tower where Harrison Enterprises continued to operate under new leadership. That chapter was closed, its lessons integrated into the story she was now writing on her own terms. "To new foundations," Daniel said, raising a glass. Vivian touched her glass to his, the ring catching the light. "And to the power of walking away from what diminishes us." As they sealed their commitment with a kiss, Vivian knew that her greatest victory wasn't in proving Julian wrong or even in Prism's success. It was in reclaiming her power to define herself, not as someone's partner or someone's rival, but as the architect of her own remarkable life.